Most of you, or some of you actually heard me talking about Wardley Mapping. So I wanted to discuss a bit what Wardley Map is, how they are used. And I guess most of you heard about serverless, what it is and why we moved to it. So I wanted to, as I said, discuss about Wardley Mapping and then have another go at describing what is serverless and why we care so much about it. So Wardley Mapping. Well, you'd start by knowing your users and focusing on user needs, but in reality, these are a couple of generally useful principles to have, regardless of Wardley Mapping being used or any other tool. And I've intentionally chosen our company founding vision, if I got that right, as in making financial advice accessible and affordable to everyone as the user need. And for us to achieve that, we said we're going to create what we refer to as Turo platform. Okay, and I'm going to connect these two together and I'll explain in a minute why. Okay, all right. And for Turo platform to exist, it requires all sorts of components. In a very simplistic model, it needs something like compute, because it needs to run calculations, need to do all sorts of projections and things like that. So what I'm drawing now is actually a chain of needs. In order to achieve or fulfill the user needs, we said we're going to build Turo platform. Turo platform needs compute and so on. And apart from compute on its own wouldn't be very useful because it needs data. That data needs to be stored somewhere. So there's a need for storage. I'm going to connect these two as well. And then compute and storage on their own, again, they're not very useful because I can't do much with them. They need networks as well. Well, I misspelled networks, but I'll ignore that. And why is that needed? Well, so I can go in the browser and access Turo for Advisors or MyEva or my app of choice. And besides this one, there's also need for things like, as a big label, let's say application, automation pipelines, and things like, let's say, software deployment. Once I've written my software, I want to deploy it on the Turo platform and make it available to be used. I'm going to connect these as well. Right, so now I have my dependencies. Again, it's a super simplistic model, but now that it's visual, I'm able to see them and assess some of the properties that these things have. For example, automation pipeline, because it's a thing that we developed in-house. It's specific to us. It's a custom built thing. Compute, on the other hand, it's a product for Amazon that we rent it, we pay for it. So that's basically a product plus rental. While networks, on the other hand, we don't do much configurations around networks. It's similar to water. Turn on the tap, you get water. So utility or commodity plus utility. Okay, so now I can separate these in their own categories, so I can visualize them better. And besides these three categories, there's a fourth one as well, which is called Genesis. And why is that? Well, before things can be built, I start with an idea, so that's pretty much Genesis. And actually, these labels, they sit on what is called evolution axis. And why is that? As things get created and components, basically these are components, each one of these. They start from idea, they get built for the first time, and they progress. They progress from left to right, and these would be the 4 stages of evolution of for these components. And the labels, they are there, for example, custom built. If a component is in there, it has specific properties to it being custom built. So this is how a Wardley map looks like. What is it useful for? Where it's visual, and I can start asking myself all sorts of questions about all these components. For example, automation pipeline. Can I use a product off the shelf so I don't spend much time with it? Or can I use it, is somebody else on the market offering it as a commodity? Not quite, but for now I have to custom build it. And the same I can ask myself any similar questions about compute. Well, compute is very vast thing, so I'm not going to go there. So there's different properties that these things have. For example, when components are on the left side in Genesis, things are uncharted. So I'm going to move this over here, make this more visible. And when things are to the right, it's industrialized. So this is a Wardley map, a quick TLDR. It's visual, it has context, that's in context within to serve Turo platform has what is called an anchor. For example, in a geographic map, there's a North Pole, which gives people direction, and then they know how to read the map. This is in the anchoring context of Wardley Mapping as in the reason for everything else existing, for Turo platform, for all these components. So that's a TLDR about mapping. And then what about serverless? What is serverless? Well, that's pretty easy. I'm gonna put it on the map, serverless, and you can see it's under commodity. And serverless is just compute as a commodity. And it's something that cloud providers, they make it a thing for us. And why is that important? Why do we care about consuming compute as a commodity instead of renting it as a product? Well, it has different properties. And as things are industrialized, we all know it gets better. But going back to compute being a product that we rent, let's say, so one of the important things, focus is on operating systems. Not everyone's focused, but the group of people that are tasked with creating something where Turo platform can run, they're focused on operating systems, which is not close to financial advice, so they're further below the stack. Another property is that it has to run 24/7, and we pay the cloud provider for that. This is how it works, we can't change it. And another property is like provisioning is managed by us, and that is to match expected peak traffic. So that's quite important because we need to provision more capacity than we need in order to match an expected peak traffic at some point in the future. So there's a bunch of unused capacity that we have to pay for. And when we use compute as a commodity, mainly serverless, focus is on applications. Maybe not 100%, but it's as close as it gets to the application. Even, let's say, me as an infrastructure person, I can start contributing things closer to the Turo platform itself. It runs on demand. For example, if I need to do an income tax calculation, it runs just for that calculation. If I need to generate one statement of fact, it runs for the duration it needs to generate that document. If I need to generate hundreds of documents, it's going to run that many times. And this is what I'm being charged for. So the billing model is quite different. And provisioning is managed by the cloud provider to match real usage. So you can see there's a bit of difference in the way compute is being provisioned and has a direct impact on the money I pay to my cloud provider in the service it's offering me. And if I want to make another comparison between these things, draw another line, okay, lose the arrow, move this higher up the stack. So there's all sorts of things here below this arrow that are needed by the Turo platform to exist, but they don't directly relate to financial advice. So why should I spend time solving problems in this space where there is a lot of undifferentiated heavy lifting, where the cloud provider is better place to do it for me? So that's why we care a lot about serverless. We want to move to it. In essence, is compute as a commodity. It's stronger, faster, harder, better. Thank you for listening.